What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another fantastic episode of OC and TJ. The NFL season has officially started, which means that we got some pretty exciting games, some pretty boring ones, and then others that were just flat out wild, in and of itself. So we're going to break all of that down. We're going to make our picks for week 2. So we're going to pretty much set the stage and the context by giving you the synopsis of what happened with each and every team that played last week. But before we do that, my name is OC. That guy is TJ. I'm extremely excited. This guy is super sad. How are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing well. I mean, yeah, my team definitely did not play very well, but I'm still super hyped because football season's back and it was a lot of exciting games. So, yeah, stoked. And a lot of craziness went on, a lot of storylines. So, yeah, just NFL's back. Let's go. Super hyped.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right into it, starting with Thursday Night Football between the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. It's a rematch of last year's regular season finale when the Dolphins, who were first place in the AFC East, lost to the Buffalo Bills 21-14. That sunk them down all the way to the 6th seed, in which they inevitably lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. And Buffalo ended up doing the same thing a week later. But now these two are set to meet up again at Hard Rock Stadium. And I think it's appropriate that we start with the Miami Dolphins because before kickoff, a football game was not something that they were thinking about. I'm sure everybody has seen the footage and seen that Tyreek Hill was in handcuffs on the highway towards Hard Rock Stadium for a traffic violation. I don't know if you've seen the body cam footage, but just watching the enforcement officers handle it and just seeing them force him to the ground in handcuffs and pulling him out of his car and just the words that were used. I mean, I was just flat out disgusted with just everything that transpired. I mean, hopefully Tyreek Hill's doing okay and that, he's back with his family and that, I was happy that he was able to be around his loved ones. Forget about being able to suit up. I was just happy that his teammates were there for him, that he was allowed to be let go, that he was allowed to be around his teammates because, I mean, that was really terrifying and disturbing to watch. And, I mean, we could talk about what provoked it or what happened and everything in a different time, but, I mean, there has to be accountability that needs to be enforced here. And, I mean, there's an internal investigation going on with the Miami-Dade Police Department, but I think a decision needs to be made sooner or later because that should not have gone to that excess. And I'll leave it at that. But TJ, do you have any thoughts? Or
I mean, just kind of a wild situation. I mean, first glance, you see the headline, you're like, no way. But then it's then up to the 1 p.m. games, you're like, dang, that it actually happened. Just kind of crazy situation. I didn't see the body cam footage though, but I just obviously heard about, it happening. And Tyreek was, he's still in good spirits during and after the game. We'll talk about it. He had a pretty good game. So, glad nothing, terrible or anything like that happened. So glad everyone's safe.
Yeah, it was absolutely unnecessary and excessive to say the least, especially not just to Tyreek Hill, but to also Calais Campbell, who literally was trying to do nothing wrong. He just wanted to see what was happening. He put his hands up. He was cooperating, yet they still put him in handcuffs for whatever the heck reason. I mean, it was just, again, I was just really bothered and disturbed with everything that happened. I mean, especially when they just completely forced Tyreek Hill out of his car and onto the pavement in 94-degree weather, nonetheless. So, I mean, again, I'm happy that those players are okay and that, it didn't get any worse than it did on Sunday. But let's get into the game. So they were trailing 17-7 at halftime. The offense was getting in their own way. The defense, had trouble stopping the run, and really they were giving up a couple long drives. And midway through the third quarter, I mean, Tua was under duress. And even though the Jaguars offense stalled out, they were still in a reasonable position to win the game. I mean, they start from the 3-yard line and they get all the way into the red zone. And one handoff to ETN that gets knocked out of his hands and recovered by the Dolphins for a touchback. And it's a completely different ball game. So one play after that, Tyreek Hill has an 80-yard touchdown. And then the Jaguars completely spiral out of control. I mean, they went for it on 4th down at their own 32, which went nowhere. Then they punted on the next drive. Then Trevor Lawrence took back-to-back sacks on his final possession. And then slowly but surely, all the Dolphins had to do was just get in reasonable scoring range to at least either get a touchdown or have Jason Sanders nail 2 field goals in to win the game. And he missed the first one, but he made one from, I think, 37 yards out. And then he ended up winning the game for the Dolphins with a 52-yard walk-off. So wasn't pretty. Wasn't beautiful by any stretch of the imagination, but, I mean, they'll certainly take it for week 1. I mean, Tyreek Hill had a great game. He had 130 yards. Jalen Waddle had 100. Achane had 70+. Tua threw for 330. And, I mean, really all they had to do was just get out of their own way, and the rest would take care of itself. So that's pretty much my brief synopsis on the Dolphins. And, TJ, I think let's transition over to the Buffalo Bills, though, because – they're down 17-3 before the 2-minute warning. And it wasn't like Buffalo was having trouble moving the ball. It was just they only let Josh Allen throw the ball 2 times. Their defense was getting picked apart. And the minute they realized that they had to make those adjustments on defense and put the ball in Josh Allen's hands, it was just a completely different ball game. I mean, the only touchdown that Arizona scored in the second half was a kickoff return. And, I mean, Kyler was held in check for pretty much the rest of the afternoon. In the second half alone, he was 5 of 11 for 32 yards. So,
yeah, I mean,
I'll let you take it over. I'm sorry.
Credit to McDermott, man. Like, he really, I mean, made some adjustments. Yeah, in the first half, Josh Allen barely threw the ball. They really were, sticking with the run game. And then, the second half, we saw, not to, I mean, it was a total team effort, but we saw why, like, the Bills are really never out of it. Like, when it's the same thing with, a lot of these, like, same thing with, like, the Chiefs, right? Like, when you can't be scared when you're in a hole like that because, they have Josh Allen, they have a great running game and, a defensive head coach that was able to put the Cardinals in check. I mean, their number one option, or supposed to be at the beginning of the season, only got 1 reception. So Marvin Harrison had 1 catch for 4 yards. So, defense really did its part. I mean, the run game probably could have done a little better. Or the run defense, they probably could have done a little better in, but this Bills team is, that was pretty, I mean, say what you want about the Cardinals, but I still think this was a pretty impressive win for them. So
it was. And again, I'm not going to say it's a statement because this was the Cardinals. I said before the season started that their defense was going to be a problem. And for as well as that offense looks on paper, it's gonna wilt down once they have to play keep up and they're forced to, play from behind most of the time. But what did you think about the Dolphins against the Jaguars?
I mean, their offense, left off, it picked up right where it left off. I mean, Tyreek, Achane, Waddle all had pretty amazing games, and Tua, made some good throws. He's had a really good game, and I think, no one's worried about the Dolphins in September and October, right? Like, it's when you get down, but I mean, it's when you get down to the final stretch. But I think for this upcoming game, this week 2 game, I think this is going to be a huge test for them.
Yes.
Especially with all the momentum of the Bills. Can they stop Josh Allen? Because Josh Allen really has been, their kryptonite for the past 3 years, 3 or 4 years. So, going to be a fun game. I'm super excited. Thursday Night Football. So, all eyes are going to be on Tua and Josh Allen to see if, they can continue their week 1 dominance.
Exactly. I mean, let's just get right into it. So I have the Bills winning because Josh Allen has his best performances against the Miami Dolphins. Tua has only beaten the Bills once. which was a couple years ago. And he could have also lost that game if Isaiah McKenzie stayed in bounds on the final play. So I don't know if anybody remembers that. But, I mean, listen, Josh Allen had 4 touchdowns last week. He came from behind. I mean, really, he only made one mistake, which was that coverage strip sack from Roy Lopez that the Cardinals ended up recovering and get an extra 3 points out of. But other than that, I mean, I love how in sync the offense was. They were more balanced than they'd ever been. And Miami, I mean, they're not going to be able to come back from a 17-7 deficit against this team. Unless Josh Allen decides to throw for 2 or 3 interceptions and they get away from the running game like they did last week, then I don't know. I just don't really see Miami pulling off this upset. For as much talent and explosion as they have, I just still think that when it comes to beating legitimate teams, they have yet to actually hit their peak. And, I mean, that narrative can definitely change since Buffalo's defense looked really, really vulnerable, with the exception of Greg Rousseau having a hat-trick day in terms of sacks. So, other than that, I think the Bills will play more than well enough to get the job done on offense. I think their defense, they'll struggle early on, but I think it'll be the same as last week where they really make solid adjustments in the second half. And in the end, I think the Bills will win this game 31-21.
Yeah, I'll go with the Bills here too. I think really the big difference here, I think they're a little healthier, and I trust Josh Allen more. And obviously, like you mentioned, the dominance he's had over this team is can't be you can't overlook that. So yeah, I'll go with the Bills here. Say 30-17.
All right. 30-17. That actually kind of sounds a little more realistic than mine, but we'll see. We'll see. It's anybody's game. I mean, to me, I feel like this is going to be like how the Chiefs and Chargers played 2 years ago when we actually had a chance to see this Chiefs team play on a primetime stage without Tyreek Hill. And when we thought that this was probably going to be a down year for them, that the Chargers would be the team that would catch up to them. This is a little bit of a similar situation since the Bills are dealing with a new roster and the Dolphins are trying to finally get over the hump. So we'll see what happens. Now we get on to Sunday's festivities, starting with the Baltimore Ravens hosting the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, where should we even start? Because both of these teams lost last week. And, I mean, I think the Ravens lost in a little more heartbreaking fashion. I mean, we got a great game last Thursday between the Chiefs and Baltimore. I mean, it started off strong. I mean, Derrick Henry had his first touchdown on the opening drive. And then the Chiefs caught up. And, I mean, Baltimore's offense just could never capitalize on their opportunities. I mean, they had 2 drives where they didn't get past the 50. And they only scored 2 touchdowns and 2 field goals. I mean, they got away from the running game in the second half. Nobody got consistently open besides Isaiah Likely. I mean, the only receiver that had more than 50 yards was Rashad Bateman, and that was because he was wide open on the final drive. And, I mean, the final 3 plays just say everything. I mean, you overthrow Likely on first down. You miss a wide open Zay Flowers on second down. And then in the final play, Isaiah Likely decides to imitate Kevin Durant and keep his foot just that close on the line. And, what could have been a game-tying or potentially go-ahead touchdown, depending if the 2-point conversion was going to be good or not, if they decided to go for it. And instead, it was ruled incomplete, and the Chiefs ended up winning 27-20. But even then, every time that Baltimore scored, the Chiefs responded with points. I mean, Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice had a big game. Mahomes, despite 1 interception, was pretty much promising. And for as many yards as Lamar Jackson had by himself, I mean, they pretty much just went with the same strategy as last year in the AFC Championship, which was Lamar Jackson or bust, and it blew up in their faces once again.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Ravens, Chiefs defense still really good. So hard to give them. I mean, this was going to be a big test for them, and they came close. I mean, Lamar, wasn't perfect, but he had some pretty great plays, and he was phenomenal running the ball, which is going to be the case. So, yeah, I think the Ravens, they showed they can compete. They're still a good team, and I'm not too worried about them. And this week, I mean, looking on the other side, I think I think this should be a game I think this is kind of like one of those get right games because the Raiders last week, just their offense really, I mean, against the
Yeah.
Chargers, they just really could not really. I mean, they had one touchdown drive
And
with
that was the swing pass
Madison.
to Madison. Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think this should be a get right game for the Ravens if I'm looking at it this way.
Yeah. I mean, the Raiders offense, both offenses, the Raiders and the Chargers, they had a hard time, getting points on the board. I mean, even with, that Alexander Madison touchdown, you kind of just had the feeling that at some point in time, the Chargers were finally going to get into a rhythm. And the unsung hero was J.K. Dobbins, who had a few big runs, finished the game with 135 yards on 10 carries, and really, he was the biggest difference in the whole ball game because if the Chargers didn't have any semblance of a run game, then the Raiders could have potentially escaped. But I mean, Minshew, he got sacked 4 times. They turned the ball over 3 times, 2 of them from the quarterback himself. They were 1 for 6 on third down in the second half, 5 for 14 overall. And I mean, even though Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers, I'll bring them up too. Even though all three of them had like somewhat decent performances, I mean, it comes down to actually minimizing those mistakes and finding ways to get points on the board. And it was just ever since that first quarter, they only got 3 more points for the rest of the game. And it was pretty much just stuck in quicksand. I mean, when Daniel Carlson is missing field goals, then it's never really going to go right. So it's not the first time, though, that Gardner Minshew has come into Baltimore as a big underdog and pulled off an upset. I mean, he did that last year with the Colts. So there is a chance that something like this can happen again. But I think that Baltimore is going to want this win more. I think it'll be a lower scoring game than we think because the Raiders defense showed that it can play physical, it can be aggressive, and it can do whatever it can to make sure that this Ravens offense is out of sync for the most part. Unless Zamir White is somehow the next Zach Moss and just runs all over them for 140 plus yards on 25 or 30 carries, then I think that the Ravens, with Lamar Jackson, with that many weapons on your offense, with that much firepower on your defense, I think it's just going to play a lot more aggressive. And I just think they have better depth in this situation. So give me the Ravens here at home, but I think it'll be a little closer than we think. So my final score will be 20-10.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Ravens here too. I think it's going to be lower scoring too. I think the Raiders defense showed they can do their thing with Antonio Pierce. So I'm going to go, but at the same time, the Ravens are a much better team. We saw that. Give me the Ravens 20-7.
20-7. Yep, that sounds about right. By the way, I was literally going through like how many games I got right last week. 15-1.
Wow.
That's probably the best. That's probably the best that I've had in my entire time, like doing these shows and writing these articles. And I'll tell you which game I got wrong in a little bit.
You should have imagine how much you should have bet on them. You would have made a ton of money.
I know, exactly. I mean, I saw on Instagram on one of my For You pages that, I don't know, I forgot what the name of the account was, but he had like a parlay set for the Packers-Eagles game. I mean, you had a Saquon anytime touchdown, a Christian Watson one, Jaden Reed, and I think he won like $5,000 or something like that. I don't know. It was a lot of money.
That's crazy.
But I mean, I don't know. I've never really done any betting just because like I don't want to risk losing hard-earned money. But I mean, I can see why other people do it. So
yeah.
Anyways, let's go over to the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Cleveland Browns. Oh dear God. Which one do we start? Because both of these teams looked pretty bad.
I mean, we got into the Jaguars a little bit. I think with them, it's just like it's the same thing with Doug Peterson, man. Like
I know.
Can't even.
I don't know why in the world would you go for it on your own 32?
That's what he did with Philly. I mean, that was ultimately one of the reasons they just decided, we can't really deal with this anymore. Yeah, I think that They were started out hot, but I mean, the Jaguars really just kind of got in their own way. And then the Browns, like
The Browns.
the Browns offense is just horrific. I mean, the Cowboys defense is obviously really good, but I think you're starting to see not starting, but this Deshaun trade and contract was a disaster, and it'll continue to be one. He just doesn't look like the same Deshaun we saw in Houston.
Yeah. Well, listen, I get that the Browns, they were without their 2 starting tackles. So that's why they gave up 22 pressures and 17 quarterback hits and 6 sacks. But let's put this in perspective. They move on from Baker Mayfield after the 2021 season because he played through injury. He was not playing well, and the Browns thought it was time for a change for whatever reason. They throw the most amount of money or the most amount of guaranteed money at Deshaun Watson, who was going to get suspended for 11 games, that didn't play that season and was going to miss nearly 2 years of football. And we see one quarterback having a career renaissance in Tampa Bay, literally proving that he's the face of the franchise, and another who just looks like a complete shell of himself. He was a disaster, not with the amount of hits and sacks that he was taking, but the inaccurate throws, the interceptions, the fact that they shut down the run game because they didn't have Nick Chubb, the fact that it was one-dimensional, even with David Njoku getting hurt. I mean, it was just a total cluster, you-know-what. And I don't even blame the defense as much for what happened because, yeah, they allowed the Cowboys to walk down the field pretty easily in the second half or in the first half. But if you told me that after halftime, hold on, let me pull up my notes here. If you told me after halftime that Dak Prescott was only going to complete 4 out of 11 passes for 29 yards and that CeeDee Lamb would catch one more pass, I'd say, all right, the Browns should stay alive in this game and they should do enough to win in the end. But nope. Every time that the pressure got there, Deshaun Watson flinched. He was under duress, and he went nowhere with the football. He was 1 for 11 for 4 yards when he was pressured. He was horrible against the blitz, and the only touchdowns that he got on the board were in complete garbage time or when they were down more than 20 points. So I feel sad that Tom Brady had to watch that as his first broadcast because, dear Lord, I mean, the fans in Cleveland deserve a lot better. And when you've seen that Jacoby Brissett and Joe Flacco have been the best quarterbacks in that offense since they moved on from Baker Mayfield, then you should have a serious freaking problem. I mean, people are calling for Jameis Winston to start. That's how bad it's been.
I mean, I think Jameis should start, but yeah, I mean, we know how much of a disaster it is. Like, kind of, this just is what it is. They're gonna have to figure out a way to get out of that. But in terms of this game, I think the Browns defense could really have a good game here. Against a Jaguars offense that's very inconsistent. I know Trevor was not bad against the Dolphins, but it's definitely this offense can have its weaknesses at times. So
yeah, it's one-dimensional. They get away from the run in the second half, and I mean, defense is pretty much just load up on the wide receivers. They just play cover one. They'll have safety help on both sides, and I mean, they pretty much just play nothing cheap, nothing deep. That's literally all it is against this Jaguars offense.
Right.
And the defense, listen, I mean, outside of that Tyreek Hill touchdown, I thought they played pretty good for the most part. It was just they completely self-destructed. So I think when it comes to this game, I don't know. I have a hard time picking this one because we know that this Browns defense can force this Jaguars offense to make plenty of mistakes. But we also know that Cleveland has probably the worst quarterback in the NFL. And that's saying a lot considering that your team has Daniel Jones. So
yeah, I think he definitely is. I would definitely say he is. I mean, that's probably the big difference for me. I think I'd probably go with the Jags here just based off quarterback play because of how bad Deshaun is. But it's going to be close, and I think it's going to be low scoring. So honestly, for this game, I'd probably take the same score as the Dolphins game because the Dolphins were 20-17, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm going to take the same score. I'm going to go 2017 Jaguars. I think it's going to be kind of one of those lower scoring games. It's really just going to be a field goal wins it. But, Deshaun is going to Deshaun. Like, he is, I think you can confidently say he is the worst quarterback in the league right now. And
Yep.
Malik Willis and Daniel Jones are starting, which says a lot.
And Bryce Young. So
well, fair.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. You know what? I might go with the same score too, because listen, I don't know how that Browns offense is going to do without David Njoku, because listen, I thought Jerry Jeudy was okay, but you could just see the body language on that Browns offense just completely collapse the more that they fail to move the ball down the field, the more that they fail to convert on third down. Amari Cooper can't be the only reliable target in this offense. It's got to come down to Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore. And, Jerome Ford has to really pick it up too. But this offensive line is just horrendous right now. You're without Jedrick Wills. You're without Jack Conklin. And now you're going up against the Jaguars front with Trayvon Walker and Joshua Hines-Allen. So, listen, Myles Garrett's going to be the best player on the field. But, the Jaguars have a better offense, pure and simple. And I think even if the Browns defense has a respectable game, it's just, I don't know how you can trust this Cleveland offense right now. Seriously, it's gonna prevent them from making the playoffs. Dead serious.
Well, yeah, they're not gonna make the playoffs.
As of right now, no. It is week 1, so anything can change, but we'll see. Anyways, let's move on to this next game here. The New York Jets travel on the road to play the Tennessee Titans. Let's start with last night, since it was the more recent one. So the Jets lost to the 49ers 32-19, Monday Night Football. Bigger score than I actually was anticipating. I did not think that the 49ers were going to completely manhandle the Jets the way they did. Listen, you're without the 49ers, you're without Christian McCaffrey, you're without Dre Greenlaw, and you have a third-year running back making his first start, and he runs for close to 150 yards on 28 carries. We all knew that this Jets run defense was vulnerable last year, but against a running back like him, that was freaking absurd. And the Jets offense was not that much better, because despite a couple good drives where you had Garrett Wilson convert 3 straight third downs that led to a Breece Hall touchdown, and then you had that free play touchdown pass to Allen Lazard. They couldn't get more than 200 yards of offense. They couldn't really move the ball the way they could. They only had, I think, 2 or 3 drives where they crossed midfield. And it says a lot when Tyrod Taylor was the best quarterback that played for the Jets today, because, Rodgers looked shaky. The play calling was listen, and Tyrod's only drive, they at least scored a touchdown. I know it was garbage time, but still.
Yeah, that was garbage time, and
I know
Rodgers was not that bad. Rodgers was not bad.
I'm being facetious, but it's just like, okay, you get the point. But, I just thought, listen, the 49ers could have had a lot more points. They really could have. Sure. But, you had 2 big Ayuk drops and some miscommunication plays. The Jets defense, they always have a strong secondary, so there are going to be times where, you stall out when you get in enemy territory. But Jake Moody with 6 field goals, that was flat out impressive. And even when Brock Purdy looks pretty okay, they still find a way to put up 30 points. And, Jets offense, they were just stuck in quicksand. 3 and outs. You had that fumble on the shovel pass, that tipped interception. So, nothing really went right for them on either side of the ball. But they did a lot better than the Tennessee Titans did, because after holding a 17-3 lead at halftime, they pretty much did everything they freaking could to lose that game. Block punt, strip sack, that horrible pick six, probably the worst play of the whole week, where he's getting tackled. He looks like it's about to get sacked, and he just flings the ball up for grabs, and it goes for a pick six. And then on the final play, he fits it well with that jump ball interception to Jalen Johnson. The Bears offense didn't score a single touchdown. Caleb Williams threw for 93 yards and completed less than 50% of his passes. I think there were, 2 for 13 on third down? Let me pull this up. Yeah, 2 for 13 on third down. They only had 148 yards of offense, yet they still won because the Titans offense completely choked and their special team still sucks. Like, no one's going to remember that Tony Pollard touchdown run where he broke free for 27. No one's going to remember that impressive catch from Okonkwo over Tyreek Stevenson that put them up 17-3. Everyone's going to remember that whole second half because of Will Levis completely. So that's my biggest takeaways. What about you, buddy?
Yeah, I think for both, like the Jets, I really think people are overreacting to the Jets. I think they played a really good team, and Rodgers really, I think Rodgers was pretty sharp coming off an Achilles. I think he was the best player on their offense by far. No one else showed up. A lot of drops, a lot of fumbles. So I think the Jets will be fine. The Titans, we're up on the Bears, and the Bears have a good defense, and their offense will figure it out, obviously. But for this game, I just trust the Jets more. I think, yeah, it wasn't good last week, but it's the same thing with the Ravens. Like, the Jets were playing the 49ers. So we just have to simmer down here, I think, with the Jets. But the Titans, I'm a little concerned that Will Levis blew that game like that. That's obviously not a good look. But I think he'll have it's not going to get any easier against this Jets defense, who's really good. So, but I'm going to take the Jets here. I think, what's the spread? I think the Jets have to be favored. I can't see it right now, but the Jets are at Tennessee, so that obviously could make things a little interesting. Jets 2 straight away games. It's interesting, but I'll go with the Jets here. I think their offense will finally start to pick it up against a decent Titans defense, I'll say, but I think the Jets can hit 30 here. I think
Okay.
I'll say 30-21. I think the Titans can still score some
Give me
points, though.
that close.
Yeah. I don't think the Titans are that bad. I just think they had a bad week 1. I think there's a difference between a bad week 1 and being a bad team, but concerned about Levis for sure.
Well, I think the Jets are going to win this game too. I think it's going to be a more convincing score. I mean, listen, the Titans defense deserved none of the blame for what happened on Sunday. They did everything they could to try to hold that lead, to make sure that the Bears never reached the end zone. I mean, the Bears had to rely on special teams and defense to win the game. I mean, it's not like 2006 where they beat the Cardinals on Monday Night Football, but it's pretty close. So I think the Titans defense will play respectable, but I think this is the time for Aaron Rodgers to really bounce back, for this whole offense to get back in the groove. And against this Jets defense, I don't see things getting any better for Will Levis. I think you're going to need a lot more of Mayo to really get through this week. So give me the Jets here, 26-10. I'm sorry I had to use a Mayo joke, but it's just
fitting. It's fitting.
It is a fitting joke. We'll get to another type of Mayo in a little while. Next up, we got the 49ers and the Minnesota Vikings. So we already talked about San Fran. Again, I didn't think it was going to be that great of a showing from them, but they got points on pretty much all of their drives. They could have had a lot more if it wasn't for some drops and some bad timing. But at the same time, I mean, Jordan Mason was a freaking stud. The defense picked up where they left off. I mean, listen, they didn't have a ton of sacks or a ton of takeaways, but they never really they only gave up 196 yards when Aaron Rodgers was under center. And it might be week 1, but against that type of quarterback, I think that's pretty impressive, especially with all the changes that they made on both sides of the ball. I know that Mike Williams didn't play a whole time, but I mean, he is coming off a torn ACL, so I can understand why they'd be cautious with him. But the Vikings, damn, Sam Darnold probably had the best game of his career so far, because I mean, he was throwing darts, he was launching dimes. I mean,
100%.
Aaron Jones had a great game, 94 yards, and the defense, as I correctly guessed, was going to lock and bottle up this Giants defense. I mean, 5 sacks, 2 picks, 1 for a pick 6, in which probably it was a horrible play call from the start, but I mean, the throw was really bad just because it was not within his target, and Andrew Van Ginkel easily got his hands on the ball. But I mean, listen, it might not have been the most convincing blowout, but things are really starting to head in the right direction for this team. And the Vikings have not lost a home game to the 49ers since 1992 when Rich Gannon
Wow.
was their quarterback. So
Dang.
either that streak is going to continue, or if San Fran is finally going to realize that they're supposed to be the better team and they put it to an end.
Man, I think the Vikings get it done here. I think they keep
Okay.
that streak alive. Um, Sam Darnold was phenomenal versus the Giants. I mean, he was probably the best quarterback of the weekend if you really think
Yeah.
about it. He was, I mean, he made some incredible throws. I mean, he was at one point he completed 10 straight passes. He was throwing some lasers to Jefferson. Really not I mean, he took some bad sacks, but really, I mean, he
He had
was
12 straight passes to start the game.
yeah, I mean, he was the closest thing to perfect of the weekend. So, credit to Sam Darnold. It'd be huge if he had this sort of like
Geno Smith run.
yeah, same pretty much. That'd be cool to see. But yeah, credit to Sam Darnold. But I think he's going to continue here. I think we don't really know what's going on with McCaffrey, and with how well they played on Sunday, who knows? Sky's the limit because the defense was clicking, the offense doesn't look like it took much of a step back from Kirk to Darnold. I'll go with the Vikings here, but it'll be close. I'll say they win 24-21.
24-21. I mean, last year they beat them 22-17. So
Exactly.
right around the
So
same ballpark. And while Sam Darnold might not be Kirk Cousins, I think that this Vikings offense still has plenty of talent that can exploit a few weaknesses in that 49ers secondary. I have a hard time struggling with this one because I think for the Vikings to actually pull this upset off, they're going to have to shut down the run game and make Brock Purdy beat him by himself because, I mean, last week Devin Singletary only had 30 rushing yards or 37 rushing yards on 10 carries. And granted, it was the Giants' offensive line, but Minnesota has plenty of makers on that front and in their secondary that can really make a lot of different things happen. And offensively, you have guys that can really get a lot of spacing. You got Justin Jefferson fully healthy, Jordan Addison, and if he's healthy because he's on the injury report right now. You got Aaron Jones, who's definitely been a bright face to this offense. And really, Sam Darnold only had one bad play, but it wasn't really his fault because he got hit on the pass rush.
it wasn't.
It was just up for grabs, and the Giants got the interception. So, I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, the 49ers are supposed to be the better team, but the Vikings have had this team's number in their own building. So I think it could really go either way here. I'm actually going to pick the Vikings too. And it's not going to be a blowout. I think it'll be pretty close. But it's going to come down to those one or two plays towards the end or in the beginning that will make a whole difference. And I think the Vikings can definitely make some things happen here. So in terms of a final score, I'll go 23-20. I'll take a point lower than you.
I like it.
So, yeah, let's get on to this next game here. The LA Chargers versus the Carolina Panthers. Historically, Carolina has had this team's number, but I mean, right now, I'm sure every single bettor is going to pick the Chargers to win because, dear God, the Panthers were utter and complete trash.
Yeah, that was bad.
You actually picked them to win last week.
Yeah, I mean, just how could you? I'll start with the Panthers.
Yeah.
Pretty brief. I mean, that was just a disaster. Like no one was good. No one. They were just bad. Like really, there's nothing to say about the Panthers. The Chargers we talked about, but again, like yes, the Chargers had a good game, but was it really convincing? I wouldn't really say that it was like a convincing win. Win's a win, so
yeah.
But I still think that
they just ran the ball better. That's what it was.
To clean up. But man, who's gonna pick the Panthers here? Like you literally cannot. The Chargers probably have a worse team than the Saints, and I still think this will be like a double-digit point game. I mean, I don't even know what I'd do for a final score here.
I mean,
up 20-10, I guess, because I still don't think the Chargers offense is going to put up because I think the one thing with you can't even say the Panthers defense is good anymore. They give up 50 to the Saints. Like
40, but close enough.
it was only 40. I thought it was so much more.
It was 47-10.
Oh, so basically, yeah,
So
okay,
you're right there. 47.
yeah,
Close enough.
that's just like, yeah. I mean, how could you have any faith in the Panthers? They just look every side of the ball looked awful. So yeah, I'll go 20-10. That's my score prediction.
Listen, I knew they were going to lose. I knew they were going to lose. I did
Yeah,
not
you're right.
think they were going to be down 30-3 at halftime and then lose 47-10. I mean, Bryce Young was trash. I mean, at some point in time, we're going to actually have to start holding him accountable instead of the situation around him.
Yeah.
Because this offseason, they actually tried to help him develop in his second year. They traded for Deontay Johnson. They drafted Xavier Liga. They signed 2 offensive linemen to pretty big contracts. I mean, this is supposed to – they hired Dave Canales to be the head coach. This was supposed to be a year where you don't make the playoffs or have a fantastic season, but you expected improvement, and we just saw the same thing over and over and over. 13 of 30, 4 sacks, 2 picks, 1 for 10 on third down, not even 200 yards of offense. It was an ass kicking. And the Saints didn't even have that convincing of a game, but they were efficient on offense. Their defense was still lights out. Alvin Kamara had a respectable game. Rashid Shaheed made big plays. And this is when Chris Olave wasn't really that involved in the game plan. So, I mean, just imagine what's going to happen against Justin Herbert. So I have the Chargers winning. But I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be that big of a score. I mean, the Chargers offense, they're still adjusting. They got younger pieces. And Ichiro Evero, the defensive coordinator of the Panthers, he's still respectable but mind enough to the point where he'll try his best with this Panthers defense, but I don't know how they're going to do without Derek Brown for the rest of the season because he's literally their best player, and now he's literally not going to play at all. So I have the Chargers winning this game 23-3, and
Wow.
I don't know. Hopefully history proves me wrong here, but at some point in time, this streak is going to have to end. What did you say for your final prediction?
20-10.
20-10?
Yeah.
All right. Well, at least you have Carolina scoring a touchdown because I think they're just allergic to it at this point. I mean, they scored more points than they did in the final 2 games of last year, so I'll give them there. But this is why, and I know it's only week 1, but this is why I said that Dave Canales and Dan Morgan are just going to be set up to fail because this is the biggest clown show of a franchise that is being run to the ground by a stubborn, egotistical asswipe that they call an owner. So I don't mean to be too big of a stretch, but that's the situation that they're dealing with right now. I'm sorry. Let's get to what I really want to talk about. The New England Patriots hosting their home opener against the Seattle Seahawks. So I think it's only fitting that we start with my team. I said last week that even though I was going to pick the Bengals, I would not be surprised one bit if the Patriots pulled this off. Their defense matches up well with Cincinnati's offense. I know that the Bengals always find a way to lose week 1, no matter what the circumstances are. But I also thought that the Bengals were going to come out like a different team. And instead, we just saw more of the same from the past. I mean, they didn't push the ball down the field. They didn't have a run game. Their offensive line showed growing pains again. And Burrow was just a complete checkdown magnet. I mean, Jamar Chase was really the only player that had some type of an impact. And the Patriots offense didn't even have to do that much. I mean, all they did was just run the ball with Ramondre Stevenson, who was a beast on Sunday with 120-plus yards on 25 carries and the only touchdown. And 2 fumble recoveries made the biggest difference in the game because the Bengals only scored 10 points, and those 2 turnovers led to 6, meaning that the Bengals just held onto the football. Who knows? Maybe they could have had a chance of winning. But, I mean, Keon White was fantastic. Christian Gonzalez bottled Jamar Chase up. I think they lined up against each other 20 times, and Christian Gonzalez only gave up 3 catches for 15 yards when lined up against him. And, I mean, listen, the Bengals offense was just so boring and predictable, and the Patriots were not that much better, but their defense played lights out, and the offense controlled the line of scrimmage, which is all that you could ask for a team that's just trying to get off to a fresh start and trying to see, like, what their biggest strengths and weaknesses are. So, that's my big take on my team. Let's get into the Seahawks, who I thought were probably worse than they'd ever been last year because, listen, their defense was fantastic. They forced 3 turnovers. They didn't allow the Broncos to score a touchdown until the fourth quarter. Bo Nix looked awful. He couldn't push the ball down the field at all. There was no running game. And the offense, however, gave up 2 safeties. They turned the ball over on the first play of their – they turned the ball over on their second play of the game after Geno Smith got sacked. And – listen, Kenneth Walker had a promising game, and Zach Charbonnet got wide open. But, I mean, so they did the bare minimum at the end. But this Seahawks team, this is why I didn't have them making the playoffs. Because the Seahawks offense has not gotten better since they came back to life 2 years ago. And as much faith as I have in Mike McDonald for him to get this defense back on track, I don't know. I actually like the Patriots' chances of winning this game. I mean, all you have to do is just not turn the ball over. Don't let the Seahawks get any late chances, and you'll be good to go. And listen, the Seahawks might have plenty of talent, but, I mean, I'm not that scared of Geno Smith at this point. Maybe 2 years ago when he was finally starting to turn it around, but it's just, like, our offense is probably going to have to return to what it was last year for us to lose this game. That's just my objective opinion here. So I think we'll win this game 23-10. I think they got to be more aggressive, throwing the football, and they got to stick to what was working for them last week. But I really don't trust the Seahawks right now. I really don't. I'll probably be wrong about this, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good game. I think with the Patriots, it's a huge win. Really good to start the new kind of regime like that. Jacoby, he was decent, but I think it was really the run game and the defense that really were the stars of the show. And the Seahawks, kind of a similar thing, even though I thought Geno, was pretty good. I think it was, a lot of it was just their defense playing against a rookie quarterback. Tough game. I think it's going to be really close. I think I just trust the Seahawks a little bit more, but it's going to be really close. I think it's probably going to be within a field goal. So I'll take the Seahawks here just because they're a more established team and on offense on both sides of the ball. But I think it's going to be super close and it could be back and forth. So I'll say 21-20 Seahawks.
I mean, pretty much every matchup between these two teams has always come down to the wire. Actually, you know what? I'll change my final score because, I mean, based on the history of these matchups, you always know that it's not only going to come down to the final drive, but it's going to come down to the final play.
Yeah.
So I'll change it to 24-21 because, I mean, listen, I've always liked the talent that the Seahawks have had on offense, and I think their defense was spectacular this week. But at the same time, it's like the Patriots' defense has been more established, and their offense is finally overhauled. That is finally ready to just get back to what was working for them a few years ago. So that's why. Now we got the Dallas Cowboys versus the Saints. I think we talked enough about these two teams. I mean, the Cowboys offense was pretty good, at least in the first half. Second, they were not that great. I mean, the only touchdown that they scored was on a punt return, and the defense played lights out. The Saints, more or less the same thing, but, I mean, it's the Carolina Panthers, so they were more dominant on both sides of the ball. I got to be honest here. I got the Saints winning in an upset here.
Whoa.
Because, listen, I know that last week it was against the Panthers, but I think that the Saints have an outstanding defense. They're well coached on that side of the ball. They have plenty of They have plenty of guys on all three levels that could really frustrate this Cowboys offense, that could shut down the run and double up CeeDee Lamb. And after last week, I actually have a little more faith in the Saints offense here. I don't think it's going to be great. I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game at all. But if the Saints offense could just minimize the turnovers and make sure that Micah Parsons doesn't disrupt the game, then I actually think that they could have plenty of opportunities to close it down the stretch. I mean, it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think both defenses will play great. But giving the Saints here 16-13.
I like that. That'd be cool, but I mean, I like how the Saints played, but I'm not ready to go there yet. I still think this Cowboys defense is great at getting turnovers. He showed that last week or on Sunday, and I just think I trust their quarterback, I trust their receiving core, and trust their offensive line more. Like I basically I'm more confident that they can. And plus, they're at home too, and we know how good they are at home. So I'm gonna go with the Cowboys here, 24-14.
All right. I mean, I could be wrong with this one, but another thing to pay attention to, what's going to happen with Jake Ferguson, because he's
Right.
on the injury report.
He could play though.
He could, but I don't know how effective he's going to be.
Right.
Since I think it's a sprain that he's dealing with in his knee, or something like that.
Sprained MCL.
Yeah. So those are usually injuries. I mean, look at Jordan Love. He's probably going to miss a few weeks because of that. Same thing could happen here with Jake Ferguson. So, all right, now we get to what we really want to get into: the Giants versus the Commanders. Before we get started with Washington, or before we get into this game, TJ, your thoughts on
Well, I mean, both of these teams are really coming off of pretty atrocious losses. I'll start with the Giants. I mean, that was like they really just could not get anything going on offense at all. I mean, they had their, I think they were just like, they started off really hot. They got a Dexter Lawrence sack and then
the fumble
recovery, but then they just really could not do anything in the red zone. And then, it's the same thing we saw last year. The defense gets tired, unmotivated when they see the offense not moving the ball at all. It was like just the same stuff that happened last year. So, and ultimately Sam Darnold was able to capitalize off that, like we mentioned, and Giants, and then Daniel Jones started forcing things and turned the ball over, and it was ugly. Commanders weren't any better, right? Like their defense is still, their secondary is still not good. Baker Mayfield was tearing them apart.
Yeah.
And I think, I think with Jaden, he still needs to kind of really just be more careful, not only with the football, but also with his body. He was taking some hits.
Yeah.
So it's kind of tough with this game because both these teams could be two of the worst teams in the league. And their offenses were not good last week. And, I think the Giants have historically kind of owned the Commanders. But it's kind of hard to feel confident about the Giants too. I think it's going to be close because these games always come down the wire. I'll go with the Commanders because they're at home. Such a terrible game.
I know.
But I'll say 20-19.
20-19. I mean, that's pretty reasonable. I mean, listen, if Daniel Jones could play the Washington Commanders every week, he'd probably be the greatest quarterback in football.
Be the MVP.
Because, I mean, that's pretty much every time he actually starts to show up.
Yeah.
And honestly, same thing with Tommy DeVito, because in his first start against them, he pretty much lit them up, even when he took 9 sacks. Yeah, that Giants game was atrocious. I actually was excited when I saw them wear those red throwback uniforms, but then they looked like the team in those uniforms.
Yeah.
It was flat out garbage.
Yeah.
Daniel Jones, I mean, he was trash. The rest of the offense was out of sync. The O-line was not improved at all. And a lot of that had to do with Jones holding onto the ball too long. But, I mean, you could just tell, like, right out of the gate that the Giants, even when they got that fumble recovery, they had to settle for 3.
Yeah.
Too many sacks, the pick 6. I mean, Sam Darnold pretty much tore them up. Kayvon Thibodeau's shutting out some of the media reporters. You got fans leaving in the middle of the third quarter. Fans booing Daniel Jones when he's leaving the stadium. I mean, at some point in time, like, fractures in that locker room are going to be created. And it's going to be because they keep trotting out the guy that's being paid $40 million a year. And if you keep him out there, you're pretty much forfeiting the season because you're not going to win anything with him. He's got more pick 6s than touchdown passes, and they made Sam Darnold look like Tom Brady. That's how bad it got. Washington wasn't that much better because I was at the game. Their defense only got 1 stop the whole game. Every other drive, the Tampa Bay got points on it. Baker Mayfield was incredible. He threw 4 touchdowns, and I thought Jaden Daniels looked decent. I mean, he had a few big runs. I mean, they couldn't really stop his legs, but as a passer, there was a lot that was left to be desired. I mean, his best targets were Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler. Terry McLaurin was pretty much shut out of the game plan. De'Ami Brown wasn't even targeted, and I mean, nothing really went right for them. I mean, they threw a few punches, but they could never really stay in the game. But I think at home, I think this is the time for Washington to really step up here. I think it's going to be a little high scoring than you think, just because, I mean, listen, this is Daniel Jones' Super Bowl almost every single freaking year. And the reason why I think Washington will win is because I know that their defense will have an aggressive game plan with Dan Quinn, calling the plays and coming up with their strategy. And this Giants defense was not great last week. And if you thought Sam Darnold was going to let them up, just wait till you have to deal with the mobility of Jaden Daniels. So I think it'll be really close. I think both defenses are going to really struggle trying to stop the passing game. But I think the Commanders at home will try to find a way to pull it through. So I have him 27-24. That's my final score. And that was a great bar right there.
Yeah.
All right. So now we get to the Detroit Lions versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I already talked about the Bucs. They were outstanding on offense. They were just as well on defense. I mean, listen, they had a hard time getting Jaden Daniels on the ground, but they never really let him disrupt the game. The Lions, they had a 17-3 lead in the third quarter. I mean, passing game was not that great, but they were able to run the ball well, especially on their drive of overtime. And even though the defense gave up 17 unanswered points to trail by 20 or to trail by 3, they came up with some timely stops in the first half. You had that 4th down stop against Cooper Kupp that led to Detroit's first touchdown. Then to end the half, you had that Kirby Joseph interception. Stafford overthrowing Cooper Kupp that led to the Lions tying the game at 20. And then on the final play of regulation, Aiden Hutchinson comes through with the timely strip sack in a situation where all the Rams needed to do was get into field goal range with 3 timeouts and 16 seconds left, and they could have won. But the Lions hung tough. They never let Matthew Stafford see the ball again. And, I mean, they just showed their resiliency and their toughness, and that was really all you could ask for. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't lights out. It wasn't perfect, but they made winning plays in the end, and they cost themselves the least. And the Rams, with as many chances to get out in front and to win the game, they let those slip out of their hands. And I thought it was the biggest difference between them losing by 6 points and them winning by 6. So having said that, I think the Detroit Lions will repeat what they did last year in the divisional round. I think it's going to be really close. Both quarterbacks are extremely solid. I think these offenses are not going to have a hard time moving the ball up and down the field. And these defenses are going to struggle because the Lions have so many playmakers that were held in check last week, but I think will have enough motivation to bounce back and to really get in their groove. And then Detroit's defense has never really been the strongest. Carlton Davis revenge game, by the way, so that should be an interesting storyline to pay attention to. Really, it just comes down to efficiency, and I think it comes down to poise, and it comes down to toughness. And as much as I love Baker Mayfield, I don't know. I think at home, the Detroit Lions will make a few more plays. That's really what it's going to come down to. But I think that it's going to come down to a walk-off Jake Bates field goal. Lions win 30-27.
Yeah, interesting game for the Lions. They almost blew it, but Goff was not very good. He had some bad throws, but in the end of the day, they relied on the run game. The defense showed up. Stafford was not good either, but we'll get into that. So yeah, I think the Lions just showed that even when they don't play their best game, they still find ways to win. And that's kind of that grittiness that Dan Campbell has kind of infused in them. And the Bucs are a very similar team too. They're gritty, but Baker Mayfield was pretty dang good albeit against the Commanders. But this is a divisional round rematch, so tensions will be running high. But I don't know. I think I'm going to take the Bucs in an upset here. I really was just super impressed with how Baker played. Made some just incredible throws, and the Lions just looked. I mean, the offense just looked kind of off against not really an amazing Rams defense. I think the Bucks defense is better. So um, I just think the Bucks, are really not proved. Obviously, it's week 1, but I think they can get the job done here. So I'm gonna go with Bucks. I'll say, I think it's gonna be lower scoring actually. I'll say they win 20-17.
All right. I mean, I
Their
could see that
defense is good.
happening, but I mean, I get where you're coming from that you think it's going to be lower scoring. But I mean, last year in the wild card, yeah, the Lions, they got off to a fast start, but they really struggled to get stay in that rhythm for most of the game. And same thing with the Rams. But I mean, the Lions didn't really win those playoff games by, completely lighting it up on offense. They were getting the points that they needed, and they did whatever they could. But it was a dogfight both times. So I wouldn't be shocked if the same thing happened with. I wasn't shocked that it happened last week, and I won't be surprised if it happens again. So that's pretty much my take on it. So let me see how many games we have left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games left. We got the Indianapolis Colts versus the Green Bay Packers. That should be. I mean, if this was last week, I'd say, all right, this should be a pretty fun game. But now that Jordan Love is out for the next 3 weeks, then I'm not sure. Because if Malik Willis is really the starting quarterback, then I don't have that much faith in them. I'll start with them. I'll start with Green Bay. I thought, listen, even with a few leads that took place in the first 3 quarters, I didn't really like what I saw from their offense. They never capitalized on their opportunities. Their defense came through with 3 takeaways, and the Packers responded with 3 field goals. Granted, they did have a few promising drives. Jaden Reed had 2 big touchdowns, one from 33, one from 70. They got off to a fast start in the second half with the touchdown, but then after that, they were pretty much held in check for the rest of the night. And credit to Vic Fangio and the defense for coming out with a different mindset and realizing who they were going up against. And the defense was not having a great game as well either. I mean, Saquon had 3 touchdowns. Sorry to rub it in, TJ. But he had 3 touchdowns. A.J. Brown got behind Jair Alexander for a 60-plus yard touchdown. Devontae Smith had a lot of catches. And really, the Eagles just let them hang around with these self-inflicted mistakes. So I felt like the score could have been a lot worse. But for the Colts, I think, listen, Anthony Richardson had 3 huge throws. You had the 60-yard touchdown to Alec Pierce, the 54-yard touchdown to Ashton Dillon, and then you had another 50-plus yard throw to Pierce that set up the final touchdown of the game. I mean, Indianapolis's defense could not get a stop the whole time. I think there were only 2 situations where they forced a punt, and every other situation, either the Texans scored or they ran out the clock. And I think that the Colts offense, they got off to a slow start, and, they kind of got in their own way a little bit with, a turnover on downs on their first drive and then an interception to close out the period. But they did whatever they could. It was just not enough. So I actually have the Colts winning this game. I just think without Jordan Love, the Packers offense isn't really going to hit on all cylinders, and it's just going to put more pressure on their defense. I also thought that, listen, the Colts secondary is not that great, and they just lost Juju Brents for the year with a knee injury. But I think as long as Anthony Richardson just holds on to the ball, as long as they continue to get that running game going, and I expect their passing game to come out a lot better, because 9 completions out of 19 pass attempts, I don't think we're going to see that happen again. And that might have been a flaw of his in college, but against this defense, I think that the Colts should have somewhat of a similar performance than they did last week. So I'll go with the Colts 26-14.
Yeah, I think Malik Willis playing definitely throws a wrinkle in it, obviously. Was really impressed by Richardson, and I think against the spotty Packers defense, I think he can get it done again. I think he can take some deep shots, and also I think he's going to be him and Taylor are going to be efficient in the run game. So yeah, I like that, a similar score. I'll say 27-10.
27-10. Oh wow! So it's not going to be that close. You got
Can't be really confident in Malik Willis, right?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, listen, they traded him for a 7th And I mean, they pretty much just wanted to get a roster.
Yeah.
They didn't want to waste a roster spot, so that's why he's there. I actually hope that they could sign Ryan Tannehill because he knows Matt LaFleur's offense. Well, he knows, like, I don't think he's actually worked in Matt LaFleur's offense, but he's a capable backup. He can actually do whatever he can to get this offense, you know, in the right track before Jordan Love returns. And, I mean, listen, you don't need Ryan Tannehill to be a hero. You just need him to step in like a Nick Foles or someone else like a Gardner Minshew that can just handle those short sample sizes. So, all right, next up we got the Rams versus the Cardinals. I think we got into both of these teams. I think the Rams, you know, listen, they let plenty of opportunities slip away from their fingers. They should have gotten extra points instead of trying to go for a fourth down or try to go for the kill, you know, to end the half. And then Stafford overthrowing Cooper Kupp, that really was a blow because, I mean, you just gave the Lions an extra chance to tie the game up. And the Cardinals, I mean, your defense looked vulnerable, and all it took for the Bills was a lot of defensive adjustments to make sure that Kyler Murray never got in sync. Marvin Harrison only one catch. The running game was never really the same, and their only touchdown in the second half was a kickoff return. So I think the Rams will win here, even without Puka Nacua and a makeshift offensive line. I think that, listen, it's gonna be really hard trying to slow down Kyron Williams to try to stop Cooper Kupp. And I think that this defense is going to play a lot more aggressive and play with a bigger chip than they did last week. I mean, maybe the Rams are a better defense than we're giving them credit for, which is why I think we're probably saying, yeah, the Lions should have been a lot better on offense, but who knows? I think the Cardinals can keep it close early on, but I just think that the Rams, they have more firepower. They're better. I think they're better coached. And, I mean, division rivalry games are always the toughest, so it can really go either way. But I just trust the Rams to really have a better game plan and to be more prepared. So I'll say the Rams win 30-13.
Yeah, I think this is going to be higher scoring. I mean, I don't have it like a blowout like that, but I think it's going to be higher scoring. Don't really trust both defenses. But I think, you know, the offenses have big play potential. So, but I'm going to go with the Rams here. Stafford was bad against the Lions on Sunday, but I mean, can't rule him out. He's gritty and he just really he beats up on these bad defenses. And the Cardinals definitely fit that billing. So I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be within a field goal. So I'll say the Rams win 34-31. I think the Cardinals have shown they can put up some offensive points with Kyler. So
let's hope so. Because they need a more consistent game plan this week. That's for damn sure. All right, now I think we have like a few more games left. Let's go to the Steelers and the Broncos. We never really got into the Steelers-Falcons game. I mean, Justin Fields got the start after Russell Wilson was ruled out due to calf tightness, and looks like we're going to get the same situation next week. But from an offensive standpoint, I thought he was okay. I mean, he had a couple big throws to George Pickens, but really he was just tasked with managing the game, don't screw it up, and just put the team in the best situation to get points on the board. And while they didn't get any touchdowns, Chris Boswell had 6 made field goals, 5 of them from more than 40 yards, and the defense was flat out insufferable. They shut down Kirk Cousins in the second half. It was a very horrible it was a horrible game plan on the Falcons' part, but they had no answers for TJ Watt. The Falcons couldn't move the ball at all whatsoever. I mean, their play calling was predictable, and I mean, 2 interceptions was really all they needed. And also, if you look at Kirk Cousins' stats in the second half, 3 of 8 for 19 yards. And when your best target is Ray McCloud, that is a little bit of an issue. And the Broncos, I mean, it was pretty much the way I thought it would go. You know, Bo Nix looked really bad. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't really get it to anybody. I mean, I think the best receiver had, 39 yards? And, I mean, the defense tried to do whatever they could in the first half, but they gave up a lot of big runs. You had the 34-yard scramble to Geno, and then Kenneth Walker had a 20-plus yard run, and then Zach Charbonnet got behind the defense in the fourth quarter. And the more the offense kept giving the ball away, the more exhausted their defense got as the game progressed. And when it comes to this matchup, when you look at the history, the home team usually has the bigger advantage here. But I think that'll change today. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers will win. It's going to be ugly, but I like their defense better. And unless Bo Nix turns into Peyton Manning or Tim Tebow, then I think that, listen, it's going to be – it's going to be a lower scoring game just because I really don't trust Justin Fields that much. And I don't know if their strategy is the most successful one. It's just a heavy run offense that really just relies on their offense or their passing game to get open a ton, which they don't have the personnel for. But I think that the Steelers have more playmakers on their defense. I think TJ Watt is going to light it up. And, it's just going to be another rookie performance for Nix. So I'll say the Steelers win 22-7.
Yeah, I think this is going to be lower scoring. I think it's going to be one of those defensive matchups, typical of these teams. But I think it's going to be much lower scoring. I just don't trust both quarterbacks and, specifically how they played last week. I thought Fields was not too bad, though. But I'll say the Steelers win here 13-10.
13-10. If it really is that final score, then we are in for a horrible game. A horrible.
Yeah.
All right. Now we get to the final Sunday afternoon one. Chiefs, Bengals. That will always be a down-to-the-wire matchup as long as Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow are the starting quarterbacks. There really isn't much to talk about when it comes to Kansas City. Anytime that Baltimore tried to keep up, the Chiefs responded with points on the board. They had better drives. Xavier Worthy was a stud. Rashee Rice had a big 100-plus yard game. The defense came through with a fourth down stop and a strip sack. And, I didn't like the fact that they let Baltimore hang around, but they did what they were supposed to do, which was just handle their business against Lamar Jackson. And now Patrick Mahomes has a 5-1 record against him. And then with Cincinnati, while some things changed, others remain the same. I get the T. Higgins was out, but this offense is just boring. It only relies on high-end talent. There's no structure. There's no real scheme in place. It's just, all right, wait till somebody gets open and then expect big plays to happen. That's pretty much what it is. And the defense did everything that they could, but you had 2 fumble recoveries and the offense going in circles. And at some point in time, Cincy's defense couldn't stop the run, and especially down the stretch. So it really bit them in the butt. I would normally pick the Bengals since Joe Burrow has had Patrick Mahomes' number in the past. But because this is an Arrowhead and that the Chiefs have more structure on both sides of the ball, I think this is a game where the Chiefs, finally win this game, this regular season game against Joe Burrow. I understand that they already beat them in the AFC Championship, but it'll be the first regular season victory for Patrick Mahomes against Joe Burrow, which is really, it's pretty crazy at this point. Yeah. And Joe Burrow's been 5-1 against him and Josh Allen combined. So
yeah.
It could really go either way, but I think the Chiefs will do enough to win here, 27-24.
Yeah, I don't think this game's going to be close. I'm completely uninspired by the Bengals, especially their beginning of the season, history over the past 3 years. It's like you can't even put it into question. And I think it's at Arrowhead, so I'm going to take the Chiefs. They're just better in every way. I'm going to go with the Chiefs here, 30-14.
Whew.
I just really can't trust them, man. You can't trust the first.
It wouldn't be too surprising, and it's just been an indictment on how this Bengals team has operated, and I feel like they've been getting
at the beginning of the season.
I know they've been getting a pass for a while now because every time they start out the season, they look flat, they look uninspired, they look rusty, and then they get their reps in. They go through 6 to 7 weeks, and they're like, oh crap, we actually have talent. Let's actually start utilizing it a bit more. They make the playoffs. They go on a deep run, and they either lose in heartbreaking fashion or they just completely bungle. So I would not be surprised if this was a bigger spread of a game, but I think, listen, as long as those two are starting, it's going to come down to the wire, at least in my opinion. So that's why. Now we get to Sunday Night Football between the Texans and the Bears. Just a month ago, these two teams were playing in the Hall of Fame game, and now all the starters will be playing under a dome. I thought the Texas offense was fantastic. Their defense really struggled in the second half. You know, even though they gave up 9 completions, they had no answers for Anthony Richardson. He had 3 total touchdowns. They gave up 3 50-plus yard plays. But the Bears are not coming off that great of a week either because 93 passing yards, less than 50% of their passes, no touchdowns, and you still win the game by 7. And the Texans are nowhere near the Tennessee Titans. So I think at home the Texans will win. It'll be really close, though. I'm really excited to see how both offenses are going to play. Chicago is going to be without Rome Odunze, so that is definitely going to be a little bit of a loss. So I think, listen, you still have DJ Moore, you still have Keenan Allen and DeAndre Swift, so I think he'll be fine for the most part. But you got to make sure that you don't give the ball back to CJ Stroud, whether it's turnovers or giving him the ball back with plenty of time left in a 2-minute situation. It's going to be really close. I think it's going to be a very intense grudge match, and honestly, I could see this being a higher scoring game than we think because Texas defense still needs time to gel, and the Bears haven't really faced a true test yet. So I'll go with the Texans 33-30.
Wow.
Yeah.
High scoring game. I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I think you saw the Bears defense really come into its own. I think it's going to continue that. I know CJ Stroud really doesn't turn the ball over and he's still super efficient, but I think it's just going to be kind of one of those games. And I think the Texans defense showed it wasn't that bad. It definitely showed some growing pains, but I think this is definitely a game where they could come to life. So, but I'm going to say the Texans win here. They're at home. So I'll say they win 20-13.
All right. I mean, listen, you know how much I love offenses, and you know how excited I am about those two. So that's why I'm going with my heart here more than with my head.
Right.
That's why I'm going with as high of a score, but I could see it being a lower game too. It's going to be really, really fun and exciting to watch.
Yeah.
All right, now finally we got the Eagles and the Atlanta Falcons on Monday Night Football. Kirk Cousins' best friend. Yeah, the Falcons were flat out horrible. I mean, the play calling was trash. I don't know why they didn't run a single play under center. It was all shotgun. It was all pistol. It was so predictable, too, because the Steelers knew that whenever they lined up in a certain front or in a certain formation, that the Steelers knew what was coming. In the second half, Kirk Cousins was just absolutely trash. 3 of 8 for 19 yards. He finished the game with 2 picks. And TJ Watt could have had a lot more sacks if it weren't for a couple penalties. And the defense did whatever they could. They didn't allow a single touchdown, but the offense just completely had no success in the second half. And, I mean, Chris Boswell made six big field goals, and that was really all it took. And the Eagles could have actually won this game by a lot more against the Packers, but they kept turning the ball over. That horrible interception on their first drive. Cam Jurgens and Jalen Hurts not on the same page on a few snaps. You had what else happened? You had that horrible interception in the fourth quarter where you're throwing across your body on a drive.
Jalen Hurts was really bad.
I mean, he was bad, but they were also, listen, you saw that they were efficient. I mean, Saquon had 3 touchdowns. You had A.J. Brown having a great 100-plus yard game. Devontae Smith played really well. Jalen Hurts threw close to 280 yards. The offense wasn't terrible. They just kept making too many self-inflicted mistakes. And if they had avoided those, they probably would have won this game a lot more convincingly than expected here. But I think at home, on this type of stage, I think the Eagles will win. I don't think their offense is going to play absolutely spectacular, but, I mean, listen, it's against Kirk Cousins. It's against Monday Night Football. This Falcons offense has a lot of work to do, and as much as I like their defense, I think the Eagles just have too many weapons on their offense to stop, and it's not going to be like a game where the Falcons don't give up a single touchdown. So I'll pick the Eagles here. I'll say they win 24-10.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I think you really just have to worry about Jalen's turnover problem.
Yeah.
Especially Falcons defense showed they can play. Eagles defense still has some question marks, but gonna go with the Eagles here. First home game, Monday Night Football. Um, and I think they could win pretty convincingly based on how Kirk played on Sunday. So I'll take them 24. I feel like I've been doing a lot of 20s. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict. So I'll go 24-13.
24-13. I mean, listen, it's realistic because I don't expect the Eagles to have like their best game of the season against the Falcons, who just retooled their defense and is trying to make a push for the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be that bad. So I mean, I think you're on the right train of thought. I mean, last week, not a lot of quarterbacks had that great of a game. So
Yeah.
I don't think we're too wrong when we make these predictions here. All right, that just about does it. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for additional content. We'll be back next week with our week 3 picks / week 2 recap, and hopefully our teams win again. Well, at least my team. Hopefully the Giants actually treat the Commanders like it's their Super Bowl, because we all know Daniel Jones has some of his best moments against them. But have a great rest of your week, everybody. We'll see you all next time. Peace. Bye-bye.